Good morning and welcome on the Sunday, the 27th of February 2022, Transfiguration Sunday, and we welcome as our preacher this morning, Stuart Talbot.
Have you ever wondered about what transfigures us? In today's readings and meetings and places that, like our confirmation service that we've recently celebrated, there is an element of transfiguration. The picture of the transfiguration that Peter, James and John were part of refers to, and our readings also refer to the transfiguration of Moses. But let's think about what really changes us, what transfigures us. Transfiguration is a word used for metamorphosis, and transformation is a word used, metanoia, and it's about transfiguration is about a state, and metanoia is about a being. And transfiguration from the earliest time has been the major festival within the Greek Orthodox Church. So I'm going to do something very different today, and you're not going to see my face for the rest of the service, because I'm going to do some work on transfiguring and transforming something. So I'm going to just tilt the video down and we'll be able to see as I talk. So just patient while I tilt the video down and we begin to talk. So here we have a bunch of clay, and this is the context in which we want to look at the transfiguration. Let's see what happened when Moses was transfigured, how he was on the mountain and was at the time of the transformation, which he came down after 40 days and 40 nights wandering around the mountain. And with him in his team was Aaron, and he was on the journey to the promised land. In the Corinthian church, you read about them struggling with internal church politics, and the team was involved was Paul and the church leaders. They were looking, and then at this issue of new creation and freedom. So we see that, and then Jesus told his disciples that he was going to die in 8 days, and James and John and Peter were taken with him and up the mountain where this transfiguration happened. So the story today is much like the story of Jesus' baptism, which marks some very special things. Moses received the Old Covenant, Elijah was the prophet of the New Covenant, and Jesus was the embodiment of the New Covenant. Moses was on Mount Sinai, Elijah was on Mount Horeb, and Jesus was on Mount outside Jerusalem on Golgotha. It was the place where heaven met earth, God's affirmation of his promises and his revelation. So if we look at all the readings, we'll see a theme developing in the readings, and that is going to be what I'm going to talk about in terms of the theme of transformation. So the first bit is you'll see that people were afraid. The second section would be people were called out. The third was that they answered this call, and the fourth was they kept the call, or they kept on giving. So let's have a look at the first bit and see. Moses was afraid. In Exodus 34, Moses was too afraid to come close to God, and the people were very afraid of Moses as he came down out of the space. And so they were all very, very, very afraid and scared and edgy about that thing. This resulted in Moses calling out to God, and God calling out to Moses and saying, help me, And God calls out to Moses and commands Moses to come back to a way of living, to come back to a way that gives life, and is then in Psalm 96 shows Moses and Aaron and the prophet Samuel were called by God for service through this through the commandments. Peter and James and John were called to serve God's people, and were called by Jesus with him to go with him and pray. And they were also called to awaken from their sleep and their sleepiness. In every instance, Peter and Moses and Jesus call out to God in their afraidness. So there we have the afraid people that are working here, and we have the called people that are coming into a relationship and answering that call with God. Then we have the God answering, and as God answers, so let's make this look like a speaker or a thing that God answers us, and he says, here is my commandment, live by them. Where the Spirit is, there is freedom. And he tells the Corinthian church and the 3 disciples that were with Jesus, he said, this is my son whom I have chosen. This transfiguration is quite a lot like the baptism of Jesus. And so we have a being called out person. The transfiguration has begun, and now we get to the last bit of this transfiguration, and we are now going to see how this happens as people are called out and develop into a nation. Moses was unaware of his state, so he didn't know what he looked like. But the people around him in Psalm 99, verse 7, were afraid, but they were commanded to keep the commandments. Peter wanted to build a tent to keep the space going and to be the right person for this moment. So he wanted to stop things, but Jesus didn't really want that to happen. He said to Peter that we must go down the mountain and we must be part of the work around us. And so here we have, instead of a tent, a picture of God going down into the world around him. And as he goes down into the with the disciples, he becomes part and parcel of the challenge to transfigure the world, and lifts the veil that comes across the face of the people as they are transfigured, as they see the transfiguration. And they are asked to keep on keeping the metanoia going, the change in their hand. So how does this change, this transformation happen in our lives, just like this has happened with this piece of clay, and it's supposed to start to look like a figure that has changed from a lump of clay into a sort of person that continues to be shaped and molded, and that is in. So what are you calling out to God? What are you afraid of? What What makes you scared? What makes you nervous? What do you want to hide away from God? What needs to be awoken in you? What is it that is in you that you're afraid of coming close to God for? And then what is God calling out to you? What does God want you to be doing and being in the world round about him? What do you want to hear God's calling? And then who is with you in your team? Who is with you like Moses and Aaron, Peter, James, and John? Who helps you to hear God's word and what you've been asked to do? And then how has God spoken to you to keep on doing things? What does he want you to keep on doing? If we can get it right, we'll put a video on to show you how transformation has happened in this picture of from a piece of clay or a thing to an image, as we are challenged to become like God in the image that God has decided to shape us and make us, to transform us from lumps of clay and earth into people that are able to go out and serve and care for him and minister to him.